She laughed, loud enough to echo across the restaurant, loud enough that I flinched. It wasn't just a laugh, it was hers. The one she used when she was fully immersed in someone else. The laugh she hadn't used with me in over a year. The one that used to be mine. From where I sat, one table over, I could see the rim of her wine glass tilt, her hand brushing his wrist as she spoke. She leaned in, not because she couldn't hear him, but because she wanted to be closer. That kind of lean. That deliberate, magnetic gravity between two people who knew exactly what they were doing. The bread on my plate went untouched. My water warmed untouched. But every word they said, I memorized like gospel. "It's weird," she said, swirling her drink. "He still thinks this is just work." He even asked if I'd be home before 10. And then they both laughed. Not the kind of laugh you share with a colleague. The kind you share with someone you've already chosen. She had texted me 2 hours ago, before stepping out in that pale blue dress I'd never seen before, just dinner with a colleague. "Don't wait up. Might run late. Budgeting stuff." Budgeting. Right. My hands were under the table, clenched. The waiter asked if I needed anything else. I shook my head. What else did I need? I had the whole performance playing out 10 feet away. I didn't need food. I needed answers. Or at least a reason not to start crying in public. And then he said something that made the air leave my lungs. "I booked the cabin. Next month. Just us. He'll never know." She smiled. She said, "He never notices anything." Except I did. And I was sitting one table over, listening to my wife plan her escape. I didn't even realize I had started biting the inside of my cheek until I tasted blood. It was warm and metallic and somehow grounding, like my body needed a reminder that I was still real while everything around me started bending sideways. They were still at their table, laughing, whispering, letting silence fall between their words like they didn't need to say much at all. That kind of comfort doesn't grow overnight. It takes weeks, months, maybe longer. And somehow I'd missed every single sign. She said his name, Elias, when she thanked him for the bracelet. A silver one with a single sapphire in the center. She slipped it onto her wrist like she'd done it before. It wasn't a gift, not really. It was a routine. I felt my throat tighten as I tried to piece it all together. When did it start? Was it when she began going to late-night team meetings on Thursdays? Or when she told me she needed space to rediscover her creative rhythm and took solo weekends upstate that I paid for? My mind flicked back to the weekend our anniversary fell on a Saturday, and she said she needed to be at a financial seminar in Cleveland. I sent her flowers. She never even brought them home. The sound of her fork tapping her plate brought me back. She wasn't eating much. Neither was he. Too busy talking. Too busy locking eyes and smiling like teenagers who thought no one else could see them. Then she stood up. I stiffened. She was walking toward me. No, she couldn't possibly. But she wasn't. She was walking past me, to the hallway near the restrooms and private conference rooms. She didn't even glance at me. But he did. Just for a second. He looked right over my shoulder, scanned me like a piece of art in a gallery he didn't understand, then followed her without hesitation. I waited 30 seconds. Then I stood. The hallway was narrow, dim, but not silent. 2 doors on the left, one on the right. One marked private event room, reserved. That door was cracked open. I shouldn't have looked. I know that. But I did. Inside, the lights were low, a single candle flickered on a small, intimate table, and she was standing with her back to him while he slowly unzipped her dress. I didn't breathe. I didn't cry. I didn't storm in. I just closed the door and walked back to my table like a ghost. I sat down and told the waiter I'd changed my mind and would like dessert after all. He smiled politely. Said his name was Aaron. Aaron didn't know he was serving a man whose marriage had just died 10 feet away. I watched their table for the next 20 minutes. They never returned. Not to the table, at least. Their glasses sat there, half full. Her napkin was folded neatly beside her plate like she had never intended to use it. When I finally left, I walked past the front desk and asked the host if room 3 upstairs was still available for walk-ins. He smiled. That's already taken. Checked in about an hour ago. Mr. Elias Bowers and guest. I nodded like I just heard a weather update. I didn't go home that night. I drove. Nowhere in particular. Just miles. Hours. Gas stations and silence. Because that's what you do when everything you thought was yours is suddenly being touched by someone else. You run. Even if you're still sitting still. By the time I got back home, it was past 1 a.m. I didn't even remember most of the drive. Just brief flashes, gasoline signs, taillights smeared like red ink in the rain, that weird blinking traffic light at the empty four-way stop near Croft Avenue. My hands had been locked on the steering wheel so tightly I could still feel the shape of it in my palms. The house was dark except for one faint light upstairs, our bedroom lamp. She always left it on when she came home late, like a breadcrumb trail to reassure me she hadn't died in a ditch or run away in the night. Or maybe it was just habit. I stared at it through the windshield for a long while, sitting in the driveway, engine off, wipers frozen mid-wipe across the glass. I didn't want to go in, but I did. When I opened the door, the scent of her perfume hit me first. That light citrus and amber one I'd bought her for Christmas last year, the one she told me was a little too floral at the time. Funny how she wore it tonight. Her shoes were by the stairs, neatly placed. Her coat hung, her keys in the bowl. It was like walking into a perfectly curated lie. Nothing messy, nothing disturbed. I climbed the stairs slowly, like each one might break under me. The bedroom door was cracked. Inside, she was already in bed, a book open on her lap, reading glasses on, like she'd been here all evening sipping tea and solving word puzzles. "Oh hey," she said without even looking up. "Didn't hear you come in. You okay? You look pale." I stared at her for a second too long. "Yeah, long day," I said. She yawned and stretched and smiled at me with that same mouth that had just hours earlier kissed another man. My stomach twisted. "Dinner with Elias ran late," she added, eyes on her book. "Finance guys never shut up. You wouldn't have lasted 10 minutes. I didn't say anything." She glanced up. "What?" "Nothing," I muttered. "Just tired." "Come to bed, babe," she said, patting the sheet beside her. "You're freezing." I didn't move. Instead, I turned and walked into the bathroom, locked the door, turned on the water just to drown out my own breath. I stared at myself in the mirror for so long I forgot what I was looking for. I kept waiting for something to snap, tears, rage, something. But there was just silence. My face looked older than it had that morning. My eyes sunken, my shoulders crooked. I stood there until the mirror fogged and my knees ached. When I finally returned to the bedroom, she was asleep. Book closed. Light off. Like nothing happened. I lay beside her, close enough to hear her breathing, but miles away. I didn't sleep. I stayed awake and stared at the ceiling, counting every single lie I had let slide over the years. Every Thursday meeting. Every half smile. Every, "It's nothing. Don't be dramatic." I thought I was building trust. She was building an exit. And I still didn't know why. The next morning, I made her coffee like always. Brought it to her side of the bed. She smiled like she had no idea. And I smiled back. But I had a plan now. Not for revenge. Not even for confrontation. Just for truth. Because if she wasn't going to offer it, I was going to take it. Even if it broke me. The next morning, I waited until she left for work before I touched her phone. Not because I was afraid of what I'd find, but because I already knew there was something waiting for me. I just didn't know the shape of it yet. She never let that phone out of her sight anymore. It used to be tossed on the kitchen counter, forgotten in the cushions, sometimes dead for hours before she even noticed. Now it was always on her. Like a second pulse. The only time she ever left it behind was in the morning rush, when she'd shower with music on in the bathroom. That gave me 8 minutes. She was humming when I slid the phone off the nightstand. Calm. Happy. Like someone who had made peace with their choices. I unlocked it easily. Her passcode was still our wedding date, which suddenly felt like an insult. At first, everything looked clean. Too clean. No text threads stood out. Elias wasn't in her contacts. No suspicious notifications. But I know how this game is played. I've worked in IT for nearly 20 years. People think deleting a text thread makes something disappear, but nothing ever really disappears. I went into her message archive. Search for fragments. See you, room, Thursday. There it was. A hidden thread, saved under the name Amanda Taxes. I opened it, and I swear I stopped breathing. It wasn't just flirtation. It wasn't just cheating. It was strategy. Schedules. Transfers. Flights. Same hotel next Tuesday? I moved the $3K from his savings to the joint. He won't notice. Don't forget, act normal after this weekend. Page after page of her handwriting, her tone, her timing, her patterns, just with a new name and a new man. And me? I wasn't even a villain in this story. I was an afterthought. I heard the water turn off and placed the phone back exactly as I'd found it. I sat on the edge of the bed, staring down at my shoes, my fingers twitching, heart racing like I'd just outrun something. But I hadn't. It had caught me. She walked out, wrapped in a towel, fresh-faced and smiling. "You okay?" She asked again. You're acting off. I looked up at her and nearly asked the question, but I didn't. Instead, I nodded. Just tired. Might work from home today. Okay, she said, drying her hair. Oh, and can you check the joint account? I think the auto transfer for my car payment didn't go through. Of course it didn't. Because the money was already halfway into a fantasy life she was building with someone else. After she left, I opened my laptop, pulled up our joint financials. There were subtle transfers every few weeks. Always under $300, never large enough to trip alerts. All moved into a secondary card I forgot she even had. Then small withdrawals. Hotel bookings. Spot charges. One round-trip plane ticket to Phoenix booked 2 months ago under the name J. Fowler. She wasn't Jocelyn Fowler. Not officially. But I knew she had told people at work she was using her maiden name again for simplicity. It was all there. This wasn't a fling. It was an exit plan. I sat there at the kitchen table as the sunlight filtered in through the blinds, trying to piece together how many nights of our life had been rerouted behind my back. I remember the anniversary trip she canceled because of stomach flu. The charity event she left early from. The one night I came home early from a work conference and she panicked because I hadn't texted first. It had been happening right in front of me. And now I was done pretending. By the afternoon, I had forwarded the entire message thread to a backup email account. Printed the financial statements. Screen captured the booking history. I wasn't going to use it yet. But I needed the truth in my hands, not just in my head. Because now it wasn't about catching her. It was about preparing for the moment she decided to bury me in her version of the story. And I had to be ready to speak first. It started with a voicemail. That morning, after she left again with her usual, "I'll be late, don't wait up," I got a call from an unknown number. I almost didn't pick up. Something about the timing made my stomach churn. When it went a voicemail, I let it play through the Bluetooth speaker while I stood at the sink rinsing last night's coffee mug. It was from her office. "Hi, Mr. Fowler. This is Denise from Davenport and Marks. Just wanted to confirm Jocelyn's return to office date next week. I know she's been working remote the past 2 weeks, but with the client onboarding Monday, we'll need her in person." I dropped the mug. It shattered in the sink. The sound startled the dog, who barked once and disappeared into the hallway. I froze, soap still on my hands. 2 weeks? She'd been going in every day. Makeup. Blazers. "The budget audit is killing me," she'd said. She'd even come home tired. With fake stories. Whole conversations about coworkers she hadn't seen in 14 days. That was the first real slip. And it gave me something even better than anger. Leverage. She got home that night just after 10. I was sitting in the living room, blinds closed, one lamp on. She jumped a little when she saw me. Maybe she thought I'd be asleep. Or gone. Or just detached enough not to ask questions. "You scared me," she laughed, slipping out of her heels. "Didn't think you'd still be up." I smiled. Calm? Too calm. "How was work?" She blinked. Long Susan messed up the vendor contracts again, and I had to fix the whole thing. "Sounds exhausting," I said, sipping from my tea. She didn't notice the missing mug. I waited a few minutes before casually asking, "How's Denise?" She paused near the stairs. "Who?" "Denise. From your office. She left a message today asking when you'd be back in person." There it was, the crack. The first real one. She stuttered. "Oh, right, Denise. Yeah, she probably doesn't know I've been in and out. Hybrid stuff, you know." I nodded, as if that made sense. I didn't press it. She looked at me for a beat too long, like she was trying to gauge whether I was suspicious or just doing that passive, quiet thing I always did. The one where I gave her enough room to twist the narrative. "Anyway," she added, "I'm dead on my feet. Shower, then bed." I smiled. "Go ahead. I'll clean up here." She disappeared upstairs. The moment I heard the shower start, I opened the drawer in the hallway cabinet and pulled out the burner phone I'd bought last week. Cheap. Disposable. Preloaded with everything I'd found. I sent one text to a number I hadn't called in years, my cousin Landon, who practiced family law in Illinois but had enough connections in state to help with what I needed. "It's time. I have documentation. I'll explain everything. Just tell me what to do next." 10 minutes later, he called. "Norwood," he said, his voice groggy. "What the hell's going on?" And I told him. Everything. I didn't cry. I didn't ramble. I laid it out like evidence in a courtroom. When I finished, he said 2 things that stuck with me. 1. Stop pretending she'll undo this on her own. She won't. 2. You need to protect yourself before she does something that forces you to defend your name. Because the truth was, Jocelyn wasn't just cheating. She was constructing an entire narrative where I would be the villain, the lazy husband, the unstable one, the reason she had to leave. And if I waited too long, she'd make sure people believed it. So the next morning, I didn't kiss her goodbye. I watched her leave with her fake laptop bag and her perfect hair and her borrowed stories. And then I drove straight to the county courthouse and filed for separation. Not divorce. Not yet. But enough to put a legal wall up between us. To freeze our accounts. To initiate asset protection. To lock down the life she was slowly siphoning out from under me. She hadn't expected that. Because Jocelyn didn't know that I had finally stopped waiting for her to tell me the truth. Now I was writing my own version. And hers was about to fall apart. The next day passed like I wasn't even in it. I showed up at work, logged into my system, stared at my dual monitors for hours. Clicked. Scrolled. Pretended. I must have written the same email 3 times and deleted it each time without sending. I wasn't even sure who I was anymore, just a man in borrowed skin, buying time before the dam cracked. But I wasn't confused. I was watching. Everything. Jocelyn texted me around 4 p.m. like nothing had changed. Dinner around 8? Thinking sushi. I'll pick it up. Love you. I stared at the message for a solid minute. Love you. That phrase had become a security blanket, a thing she said when she didn't want to explain where she'd been. I used to reply with, I love you more, without thinking. Today, I just locked the screen and slid the phone back into my drawer. When I got home, I made sure everything looked normal. Lights on. Dishes done. TV playing some forgettable documentary in the background. She walked in a little after 8, coat slung over one shoulder, smiling, a paper bag in her hands that smelled like soy and lies. Hey babe, she said, kissing my cheek. Hope you're hungry. I didn't answer. I just gave her a small smile, the kind you give a stranger who accidentally bumps into you on the sidewalk. We ate dinner mostly in silence. She told me about a fake meeting that ran long, about a client who was driving her nuts. I nodded, chewed slowly, asked polite questions. She looked relieved that I wasn't probing deeper. That was her mistake. Because just before bed, while she brushed her teeth, I slid the envelope under her pillow. Inside it was a single photo. The kind you print when you want undeniable proof. It was grainy, captured from the hotel hallway camera, but it showed her. Clear as day. Her hand on Elias' chest, her face tilted up toward his in a way that wasn't just dinner. It was time-stamped. It matched the night she swore she had food poisoning and stayed with a co-worker from HR who lived closer to the venue. I went downstairs, turned off the lights, sat in the dark and waited. 10 minutes passed, then 20. I heard nothing. And then, her footsteps on the stairs. Careful. Light. She didn't speak. She walked into the living room with the envelope in her hand. Her face was pale, unreadable. What is this? She asked, her voice thin. I looked up at her and said quietly, you tell me. She opened her mouth, closed it again. The silence stretched between us, thick as fog. Are you following me now? She snapped, voice sharpening. No, I said, but I don't need to. You're not as good at hiding things as you think. She looked at the photo again, then at me. This doesn't mean anything, she said. It was one night. It was complicated. I laughed, not because it was funny, because it was the first honest thing I'd heard her say in months. Complicated? I repeated. You made hotel reservations under fake names. You created a second checking account. You told people at work you were going by your maiden name. This isn't complicated. This is planned. She was trembling now. Her fingers tightened around the envelope. What do you want from me? She hissed. You want a confession? Fine. I made a mistake. I leaned forward. No. What I want is for you to stop pretending like I'm stupid. She didn't speak. I stood up, walked past her, and paused at the bottom of the stairs. Everything's already in motion, I said without turning around. The bank accounts. The legal paperwork. The documentation. Then I climbed the stairs and went to bed. She didn't follow. She stayed downstairs, frozen in the middle of the room, holding that single photo like it weighed 100 pounds. And for the first time in months, I was the one keeping her awake. She was different the next morning. Too quiet. Too still. Like someone trying to hold in a scream. I sat at the kitchen table nursing cold coffee while she stood at the counter, pretending to read something on her phone, but her hands wouldn't stop fidgeting. I could feel the fear pressing off her like steam. She didn't speak until I stood to leave. So, what happens now? She asked, almost whispering. I didn't even turn around. That depends on what you think I know. There was a pause. Then she said my name like it was a weapon. Norwood. It was the first time in a long time she said it without sounding bored. But I was already out the door. I drove straight to Landon's office. The separation filing had been accepted, the financial freeze in place. We talked strategy. Not revenge, just safety. I had no interest in ruining her. She was doing that just fine on her own. I just didn't want to be the casualty she walked over on her way out. That afternoon, the first domino fell. I was in line at the grocery store when I got a text from an old friend of ours, Erin. She and Jocelyn used to be close. I hadn't spoken to her in nearly a year. Her message was short. Hey, saw something. Call me. When I called, she didn't even say hello. I didn't know, she said quickly. I didn't know what she was doing. Norwood, I swear. What did you see? She took a shaky breath. She's been introducing herself at networking events as single, saying you were dealing with mental health stuff, that you left. I saw her with that man. She said he was her fiancé. I only believed her because I didn't know you two were still together. I couldn't speak. My throat had gone tight. She's telling people you've been separated for almost a year, Erin added. That you're unstable. I hung up without saying goodbye. I drove home like a man trying not to crash. I kept my hands at 10 and 2, eyes locked on the horizon, jaw clenched so tight it gave me a headache. Because now I wasn't just unraveling her lies. I was walking into a version of reality she'd been building for everyone but me. When I walked in, she was sitting at the kitchen island, laptop open, phone in hand. She looked up the moment the door shut. We need to talk, she said sharply. No, I replied, dropping my keys. You need to listen. I set my phone on the counter and hit play on the recorded call with Erin. The whole thing. Jocelyn's face changed slowly, anger giving way to panic, then to something colder. Something cruel. So now you're spying on me and my friends? She snapped. You made up an entire alternate life? I said. Do you even hear yourself anymore? Her voice rose. You don't understand how trapped I felt. I couldn't breathe in this marriage. I stepped closer, calm. You could have left. You didn't have to lie. You didn't have to humiliate me behind my back. Her eyes burned. You would have collapsed if I left. You need me. That one broke something in me. Not because it hurt, but because it was so confidently wrong. I don't need a person who lies for sport and calls it mercy, I said. And I'm done letting you control the narrative. Then I slid a printed letter across the counter. It was a notification, sent to her HR department. A copy to her supervisor. Carefully worded, entirely professional. Just a factual timeline. Documentation of her claims about my mental health. Corrections. No accusations. No threats. Just truth. Her hands trembled as she read it. You're going to ruin me, she said flatly. No, I said. You already did that. I'm just showing people the debris you left behind. She stood, shaky, then knocked the letter off the counter. You can't do this. This isn't who you are. I met her gaze and said the one thing I knew would land harder than anything else. It is now. And for the first time, she looked like she believed me. She left 3 days later. There was no dramatic suitcase dragging scene. No yelling. No begging. She didn't even slam the door. It was quiet. Surgical. She took the clothes she needed, a few personal boxes, her laptop, her second phone, which she still didn't know I'd cloned, and a stack of untouched mail. She didn't say goodbye, and I didn't stop her. I watched from the upstairs hallway window as she loaded her car. Her shoulders were tense, like she was waiting for me to charge out onto the lawn. But I didn't move. I wasn't angry anymore. I was just done. When her car rolled out of the driveway, it felt like someone finally opened a window in a room I'd been suffocating in for years. The silence wasn't hollow, it was clean. After she was gone, I walked into the bedroom and stripped the sheets. Not just to erase her scent, but because it felt like I was peeling away everything I'd been clinging to. I tossed the fitted sheet in the laundry and stood there in the bare room for a long time. There was no ache, no fury, just air. Then came the messages. First from Erin again, then others. People who had believed Jocelyn's version of things reaching out in quiet shock. I'm sorry. I had no idea. She told us you were unstable. She said you didn't want her to grow. They weren't apologies, not really. But they were corrections. The narrative was no longer hers alone. And that was enough. I focused on rebuilding, not to prove anything to anyone, but because I needed to figure out what it meant to be me again, without her shadow over everything. I started cooking again. Real food. Spicy, messy, loud meals with garlic and too much onion. I even planted tomatoes in the backyard. She hated tomatoes. Said they were too rustic. I started sleeping with the window cracked. Listened to the sounds of the neighborhood. Children laughing. Dogs barking. The wind through the trees. It reminded me that life still happened around me, whether I was shattered or whole. Therapy came next. It wasn't easy. The first 2 sessions I mostly just sat there staring at the floor, feeling like a failure. But the third session, I finally said something out loud. I spent years trying not to lose her and forgot how to keep myself. My therapist didn't say anything profound. She just nodded. And that was the beginning. Now, it's been 6 months. I'm still in the house, though it feels different. Warmer. Lived in. I bought a new couch. Got rid of the rug she always said clashed with the curtains. Painted the office a bright, ridiculous blue just because it made me smile. I even adopted a cat, Oliver. He's terrible at listening but great at sitting on my laptop when I'm trying to work. I'm not dating. Not yet. But I'm not afraid of being alone anymore. The other day, I got an email from Jocelyn. Short. No subject line. I made mistakes. I wish I had handled it differently. I hope you're okay. I stared at it for a long time. Then I archived it. I didn't need to answer. Because some chapters don't end with a door slamming. Some just quietly close. And you don't realize you've turned the page until the sun comes up and you're not dreading the day anymore. I'm not healed. Not completely. But I'm free. And that's a beginning I never thought I'd get.